Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today we're doing an artifact tier list in Marvel Future Fight. We're going to rank all of the artifacts that exist currently in the game in 5 different categories, from 100% needed all the way down to useless, and I'll be explaining each one. Currently, we only have about 20 artifacts in the game, so it makes it a lot easier to do a tier list like this, to organize them, and also to spend the time talking about them in the future when there are a lot more artifacts, and we seem to be getting at least 2 to 3 to 4 per update. These videos are going to have to go by a lot faster so you can appreciate them while they are sort of in their infancy. For those of you that don't know what artifacts are yet, you're sort of behind the train at this point. But if you go over to the store and you go over to artifact under dimension chest, you can see the artifacts and you can go ahead and peruse some of the artifacts that exist right now. And basically what artifacts do is they're designed for one specific character. The character that's icon is there, and they will give them an additional passive and or sometimes active effect. So they can be very, very powerful, or in some cases they can be kind of useless. So we'll be talking about all of that. But yeah, artifacts are here to stay. They are a way for you to power up your characters. They are also a way for some characters to basically get new ways of being played. So they can, like, the power level of these artifacts can really range. Some of them are just stat boosts, but others really unlock essentially new paths of the character's design that aren't there in the base kit or in the uniform or in the tier 3 or whatever it may be, the case may be. So it can be very, very powerful. And in some cases, they're, like I said, 100% needed for the character to survive in a particular game mode. Now, as it currently stands, the majority of powerful artifacts are PvP focused, just because of the passives that the devs have come up with for PvP that they can then shower onto specific characters. In the future, I don't expect this to remain the same. I do expect the devs to come out with really good offensive PvE focused artifacts, but we haven't quite seen that yet. We've seen glimpses of it, little bits and doodads here, but not really the cream of the crop just yet. So we're going to start with useless here. Useless artifacts are artifacts that essentially don't do enough for the character that they're for, and you equip them and you're barely going to feel a difference, and you're not really going to notice it. One thing also to keep in mind before we continue, I'll sort of plop the useless ones in here because there's not too much to say, is that the artifact, even if the artifact is very powerful, it also kind of depends how powerful the character is. So I will be discussing that a little bit. For example, White Fox's artifact gives her a heal. That could be a lot better on other characters who don't have as much healing, or like Captain Marvel doesn't have any healing, for example. But for White Fox, as she's a support type and she spends very little time dealing damage, you're not really going to need healing. And if you're using White Fox as your main DPS, that's kind of weird, but I guess. So yeah, that's sort of the case with some of these, but I'll sort of explain why, some very good characters, if they just have average artifacts, are not going to be near the top, and I'll explain that. But basically, hers is a heal. Waves is just a damage increase. It's just a basic damage increase, which is, again, terrible because Wave is just a leadership support. And then Luna, even though Luna is an amazing character, her artifact gives her more cold damage, equal to half of her cold resistance. You don't want to have cold resistance on your Luna Snow. The only reason you would want to keep this artifact or even equip this artifact on your Luna is for ranking. If you're trying to get like rank 1 or rank 10 or whatever Luna. The only other reason, if you were desperate, let's say you're like a newer player and you just happen to get a Luna artifact from a Dimension Rift or something like that, and then you rolled, let's say you rolled an obelisk, or the login event gave you an extreme obelisk, a mythic obelisk, and it had double cold resistance and then a 200 proc obelisk, I guess. If you had an obelisk as ugly as this sounds, that was like 35% cold resist, 35% cold resist, so double cold resist rolls, and then a 200 proc, if you equipped Luna's artifact, it would be it would basically equal a 35% cold damage 200 proc. It would be half as much. That's not bad. But that is an extremely narrow set of circumstances, and the majority of players are going to be building their Luna for a Judgment or a Rage anyways, so it makes it completely moot, and no one in their right mind would roll their comic cards, their 5 equipped premium cards, no one would roll those for cold resistance. So yeah, the devs tried something unique here, and it was a humongous miss. Moving on to the next category of not enough. These artifacts could be pretty good, or they feature effects that could be powerful under the right circumstances, but they're just not enough. Either they're not enough for the character, or the character doesn't have enough other abilities to make those strong artifact abilities work. So in the case of Swordmaster, his artifact ability, I believe it's a damage buff, and when it activates, it gives him iframe ignore on all of his skills for like 6 seconds. That seems really good. Iframe ignore on all of your skills seems good for PvP, except that Swordmaster's not good for PvP. He doesn't have any of the other abilities that make him good for PvP, so it's just not enough. In the case of Hyperion, it gives him, I believe, damage reduction, incoming damage reduction, and ignore dodge. Those are good buffs, and he needs the ignore dodge for PvE content, but Hyperion himself is just not good enough to sort of utilize those buffs in an interesting way. Same sort of thing goes for Arrow. Hers is a debuff, a chance to ignore debuffs as they're coming in, so a chance to just shrug them off. And then I believe she also has a buff or a heal or something like that. Again, not quite good enough, not really going to move the needle on the character's power level in a meaningful way to tell you to, you know, hoard these artifacts. Keep in mind, if you get these artifacts for these characters, you can equip them. You could keep them to see if they get buffed in the future, or you could just dismantle them for the Celestial Essence that it provides, or you can use them if they're 4-star or higher. You can use them to re-roll other 4-star or higher artifacts to try to get the right instinct to match the character for the ones that are better in these last 3 categories. So these last 3 categories, I would say these types of artifacts, if you get them, you should strongly consider keeping them, and also strongly consider equipping them on the character that they're for. But I'm not saying you should necessarily build the character that they're for. You know, if just because you have Icarus's artifact, it does not mean you should go through all the fuss of building Icarus. He's a lot cheaper now because you can farm his bios in Kingo and Cersei's epic quests, but even then at max build, he is not gonna blow your socks off. Sharon Rogers, on the other hand, everybody has Sharon Rogers. So yeah, if you get her artifact, 3-star, 4-star variety, you can farm for it for free in Dimension Rifts. I would say slap it on her. It's not going to, like, you know, it's not going to be night and day for Sharon Rogers. It's just good. It's just solid. It's going to give her instinct crit rate and instinct crit damage. Not bad at all. Shang-Chi, I believe, gives him increased damage to villains and ignore dodge, or basic damage. Like, it gives him an attack buff and ignore dodge. He needs the ignore dodge because he doesn't have much except on his 4th skill as a buff. So again, pretty good buffs for pretty good above average characters. And then last but not least, we have Captain America and we have Crescent. They both have similar artifacts. Captain America deals more damage to villains and reduces the damage he takes from villains. And then I believe Crescent increases the damage she deals to both heroes and villains, which sort of makes it seem more PvP oriented. But Crescent is not incredibly good, not very good for PvP, so it sort of just lands her in the good category. For these ones here, very good and up, again, I'd strongly recommend, if you get a high, like if you happen to get lucky and you get a 5 or a 6-star version of these artifacts, consider building the character, because they're very strong effects that can make the character that's already very good, it can put them like a cut above. So Makari and Kingo have really interesting artifacts where they flip-flop. Makari deals more damage when the boss has more HP, above 50%, and then Kingo's deals more damage when the boss has below 50%. Makari's in specific is very good for particular game modes. That is, game modes where the boss never loses HP. Squad Battle and Alliance Battle Extreme. There's no health bar at all for Surtur in Squad Battle, so her artifact is going to be triggered 100% of the time. And then in ABX, the Frost Beast does lose HP, but it always bounces back, always above 50% or almost always above 50%. So yeah, her artifact basically triggers the entire time, which is super clutch. Kingo, on the other hand, obviously would be, this artifact would basically do nothing for him in Squad Battle and ABX because it's the reverse, but it's very good for switching into Kingo and finishing off bosses in World Boss Ultimate, World Boss Legend, and that kind of content when they're 50% or below, because it'll trigger that buff. Sif just gets more ABX buffs in terms of extra damage to supervillains, which the Frost Beast is a supervillain. And then Thena gets, I believe, increased damage to villains, which is basically just a better version of Sif's, and ignore dodge, which again she also needs for things like Null and Mephisto, Null and Corvus and stuff like that, due to the fact that her base kit now only has 20% ignore dodge. I'm trying to get this one stray cat hair off of my face, and I cannot seem to do it. Okay, moving on to the last category, and it's pretty obvious now which characters are going to be in the 100% needed category. So this is interesting. These 5 characters, when I say 100% needed, what I mean is that these characters are not going to be able to do the thing that they can do with the artifact without the artifact. That's going to sound a little bit weird, but essentially when you understand what these artifacts do and you see how powerful they are, it will start to make sense. So for example, Wolverine's artifact and Hela's artifact are the same effect. They will, when they get below 5% HP, they trigger an immortality buff. And the immortality buff stops them from going below 1 HP from 4 to 7 seconds. That long, 7 seconds of immortality. And then after the immortality is done, they'll get a heal equal to 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50% of their HP. So imagine you're about to kill Wolverine in PvP, and then he dies. Oh, cool, okay, it's over. Next. Okay, now imagine this. You're about to kill Wolverine in PvP. You get him down to 5% HP, or you think you one-shotted him. Surprise, surprise, his instinct, or sorry, his artifact with instinct kicks in, and now he's got 7 seconds of immortality. Not only is that morally a punch in the gut for you, but now you have to stall for 7 seconds because you literally, like, your skills aren't going to do any damage to him. So you can heal yourself or you can charge up your tier 3 or whatever, but your skills are not doing any damage. So you're stalling for 7 seconds, and after that 7 seconds is done, he's going to pop back up to half of his health on top of the health he already healed because he has natural healing. Sound broken? Sound OP? Sounds like Wolverine 100% needs that artifact to be a top 5 PvP threat? You bet your bottom he does, and he is. He's a top 5 PvP character in the game right now with this artifact, especially if you have it at 5 or 6 stars, because that is 6 or 7 seconds of immortality. And the exact same thing goes for Hela. Without her artifact, she is at best, I would say, you know, sometimes able to take down some superheroes in PvP, and almost, you know, majority of the time just there as a support buff for other characters. With her artifact, she is a legitimate threat in PvP and maybe in the top 10 of the best PvP characters in the game, maybe top 15, given how powerful her support is, her leadership is, and then also the fact that you can't kill her right away. She gets 7 seconds to up to 7 seconds to come back into the fight. So that's kind of how it boils down for these artifacts. They're not needed to make the characters good. Like, all 5 of these characters, with maybe the exception of Heimdall, are good to great on their own. Like, Wolverine is still amazing for ABX even if you don't have his artifact. Gilgamesh is still pretty good for PvP without his artifact. Hela is still amazing for PvE, right? Her artifact has nothing to do with her PvE performance, her World Boss Legend performance, etc. Cersei is still an amazing support for the Eternals and still solid for PvE if you can accumulate without her artifact. So you got to be careful here. I'm not saying that you need these artifacts to build these characters at all. I'm just saying that the particular additional ability that these artifacts bestow are basically 100% necessary to maximize the value. So Cersei's artifact gives her a revive. Like, it's obviously mind-blowingly powerful in the right circumstances. So if you see people using Cersei in PvP and you're like, oh man, I want to use my Cersei in PvP, well, you 100% are going to need her artifact in a 3, 4, 5, or 6 star variety. Same thing goes with Heimdall. Not a very impressive PvP character, but when you get his artifact, he gets a massive heal, and he also gets something else. I can't remember exactly what it is, but he basically gets 2 effects with his artifact, which is kind of dummy. He gets a heal and he gets increased damage to villains. Yeah, pretty awesome buffs there for him. Maybe you could argue that Heimdall's is a little bit lower, but I feel for Heimdall in particular, it's kind of needed because he has no base heal. If Heimdall had a base heal and this was just a second heal, then I would definitely put him down here. But because he doesn't have a heal, really, if you want to unlock the full potential, it's really a 100% necessity. So it's a little bit complicated here. These are the best characters. These also happen to be the best characters up here, with the one exception of Heimdall. Obviously Makari and Athena and possibly Kingo and Sif are better. Sharon Rogers is obviously way better than Heimdall, but in terms of how much value, right, like what does the artifact do for Heimdall versus what does the artifact do for Sharon? The artifact doesn't do that much for Sharon. She's already huge DPS god. It does a lot for, it goes a long way for Heimdall. So you just sort of have to understand that the artifacts themselves, I'm ranking the artifacts in terms of what they do for the characters and how they change the characters and add to the characters, the building blocks, but you would still need to refer to a tier list to see, like, okay, even with their 6-star artifacts, you'd rather have Sharon Rogers tier 3 than Heimdall Transcended, because Heimdall Transcended is still not going to be able to go very high in World Boss Legend or World Boss Ultimate or do all this other content, squad battle, etc. Sharon Rogers definitely can. Right, so hopefully that makes sense. I'm not saying Heimdall as a character is better than Sharon Rogers. It's just that his artifact is so valuable for him, whereas you can live without Sharon Rogers' artifact. It's not gonna destroy or ruin or sort of hamper your gameplay. If you want to play Wolverine or Gilgamesh in PvP, yeah, you kind of need their artifacts, especially if you want to win a lot, especially if you want to win at a high level. So that's the first tier list. This is the first unofficial tier list for the artifacts in Marvel Future Fight. Hit me up in the comments down below and let me know what you think of the artifacts. I know there's some mixed feelings about the artifacts. I really like them. I do think the devs are going to need to, and I think they will introduce more ways to farm them and more ways to farm them more easily as time goes on, because they recognize that they're very rare and very, very hard to target farm, i.e., you know, farm a specific artifact that you want. They're trying to squeeze their money out from whales right now. But yeah, I think in the next 6 months, we'll be looking back on this video and being like, yeah, it's way easier to get artifact A, B, or C now than it was. And on the flip side, I'm so excited for when some of the more iconic marquee characters get artifacts, because we've seen how much it can do for a character like Wolverine. We always wanted Wolverine to have a revive, but it's not like they were going to give him a uniform that gave him the revive passive, because that would just be way too broken. So they did the next best thing. They gave it to him in an artifact. Imagine if they do the same thing for Hulk. Yeah, now I've got you excited. Do with that information what you will. Thank you so much for watching. Smash the like button if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.